Thank
Hello.
you for having us, first of all. We are very happy about this initiative, and we feel very privileged being two people in a conversation because we are friends also in life, and I think it's important to say it. And we are going to discuss today different topics that we discuss all the time, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we decided to give the title of Contemporary Craftsmanship to this talk. It might seem maybe obvious to some of you to have these two things together today, but we have really, and we want to try to question today with you how we came to that narrative of the contemporary craftsmanship. So maybe just to start with, we wanted to go through several subjects, and the first one being, of course, the work of Gunjan. Her journey as a designer was always been so true and so passionate about the craft. And we wanted to first acknowledge what is going on today, which is the renewed interest in the crafts, which is quite recent. So I would maybe ask you to start with how you've been seeing that from your professional's perspective.
So my journey in craft is almost 2 decades ago. It was a completely different landscape back then. And it started off with me moving from Mumbai to Delhi. Mumbai played obviously a very integral role in the way I saw design, particularly in the way modularity and versatility of any design object was conceived in Bombay. Everything had to be multifaceted. It had to fit in homes that were small, etc., etc. And then my move to Delhi kind of transformed my understanding of India. I really did feel that as a Bombay girl, I hadn't experienced India or seen it in the way that, one should. And there began my journey of discovering craft as the essence of India, a very emotional journey, I have to say, because back 20 years ago, one saw craft in a very sad state. It was in a degenerative space. It wasn't. It was pejorative. Everything around you was craft, so people didn't value it in the way that one should. But at the same time, it was all there. It was all kinds of craftsmanship was flourishing still. Delhi is very interestingly located between Delhi, Agra, Jaipur. So as a result, you're surrounded by it. And I think that began my journey with focusing on craft. I did my master's at Central St. Martin's with a thesis project that said, why does Indian design, contemporary Indian design, not exist in the West? And there began my journey into looking at, what were the issues, what were the reasons. One of the important things that I felt was that the Indian craft was always used as a decorative element. It was, and decorative arts in the hierarchy of the visual arts have always been at the bottom of the pyramid, in a sense. So I think the power of concept, of bringing decorative arts within the narrative of the form. I'd like to go back to the first slide. So this was the first chair on the left. It marries two crafts, which is Varksaz. It's 24-karat gold leaf. And pure silver. This was my graduate project, and I presented it at 100% Design in London to an audience that perhaps had not engaged with the idea of luxury emerging out of India back then. And I think it's also, not only is it the power of concept, but it's also the power of storytelling that we as Indians have, we just have, it's a plethora of stories, which when converted into design objects, to kind of reiterate that, I'm more of a storyteller than a designer. Every object tells a story more than function. You'll see it in my work as I present it. So the first one is the story of Ganga Jamuna, the two rivers that meet. It's a very common term. It's a colloquial term used in the combination of gold and silver. So here are two crafts made to the finest quality. This was 20 years ago. Idea of luxury was presented. And there was no collectible design as such. Galleries were still being formed in London. Carpenter's workshop was launched in 2004. the whole gallery scene was emerging. The dialogue between art and design was kind of getting blurred with Ron Arad, a whole bunch of movements happening in Italy, France. So it was the idea of craft that really didn't exist within contemporary design. I mean, we were all moving from industrial design to a design space. Another opportunity that kind of came to me soon after the first one was presented was working with Droog in Amsterdam, where it was looking at street culture and marrying it with craft. So the bicycle thrones came. We can move forward. These are iterations of basically street vendors in India that you see all around you. How that whole narrative has been captured into a throne, into a seat, and combined with industrial design, which is bicycle products, and Indian mastercraft. This was recently presented at Homo Faber in Venice. So the journey has really essentially been sort of very organic, did not start as a collectible designer. Interior design is something where, again, contemporary craftsmanship was something that we subscribed to, used it extensively. That also helped pay the bills for doing the kind of objects that I was doing, for which there was no market. The last 10 years, I have to say, with regards to the evolution of the craft space, there has been definitely the, emergence of a new voice, new vocabulary, craft being the sort of buzzword in, all aspects. One of the recent initiatives was the launch of Ikkis, where I felt the democratization of my practice was important. My work was very conceptual for many years, and it was something that really, the market didn't really exist for it unless it was an institutional collector or a gallery internationally. So Ikkis is basically a very functional brand that again marries craftsmanship with industrial design. The forms are essentially Indian. It has always been very important for me to present the Indian lens on Indian craft internationally. What we have always seen since the last 500 years has been a Western lens on Indian craft. So I think it was very important to start seeing it our way, in our language, which had international appeal.
So what I would comment maybe on that is also tell you how, as a French person who didn't know anything about India 2 years ago when I arrived, how I got the intuition, the same intuition I think as you had 20 years ago, that craft was a big part of the narrative and also a playground for dialogue. Because when I wanted to invite French designer, French artists to India, I thought, what would make India unique? Why would people come here and say, there is something that we can do, a creative experience that we can have here that is not available in some other parts of the world? And that was the initial question. And I realized that the craft were mostly unique, and the production possibilities that you have as an artist or a designer collaborating with craftsmen in India is really a tool for attractivity, to be honest. Of course, you have to set up a framework and say what are the rules of the collaboration, and we'll get back to that, I think, later on. But that's how I built up this residency program that we were just talking about, and I wanted to show some of the last realization of the artist. So this is a piece that was made last year by a young French artist at Nila House in Jaipur. I'm sure some of you know that space, which is specialized in the old indigo techniques and really the traditional crafts from Rajasthan's textile crafts. This is another image of one of my artists who collaborated with craftsmen in Jodhpur. She's going to be exhibited very soon, on the 15th of October. You'll be able to see her work in the public space of Jodhpur, so it's quite exciting. It's a result of more than 1 month of just dialogue with these artisans. And all of these people are coming from visual arts, and we'll get to that point also after. They are not designers or craftsmen themselves. And last example I wanted to show you is a chair which is called the Pompeii chair. that was made by a young girl called Victoire de Brandt at Le Sage in Chennai at Vastrakala, which is one of the most famous embroidery studios that you have in the country. And this is a collaboration during a residency, and the piece is now exhibited since last week in Paris for the 100 years old anniversary of Le Sage. So we are very proud about it. All of these people, they are in their 30s, to be honest. These three girls I show you the work of, they are in their 30s, and when I told them there is an opportunity for you to come and to experiment the craft, meet the craftsmen, these people just have stars in their eyes, to be honest. So that's where I wanted to come as a second point, which is also how there are two aspects, two of my question. One is also how do you see the craft coming in some other creative spaces, like visual arts, like institutions, museum, and how craft is also invading in that contemporary perception of it, invading other spaces. And also maybe something else, which is how is India putting up that narrative today as a real soft power tool? Because I mean, I'm coming from another country, so I'm very comfortable saying that it's a real asset today. And how do you see that narrative also coming up? You being an Indian designer, showing a lot abroad, what is the perception of this also?
So I just want to add to what Amandine said about the Villa Swagatam designers. I've interacted with a few, and I have to say that the passion with which they come to India to discover the craft sector, and it's just obviously opens up a whole new way of seeing things. So it's very powerful, and the cross-cultural dialogue, I think, will remain for eternity, because I don't think India is ever going to not have something new to offer in that space. I think the idea of craft as a soft power, I mean, I discovered the power of it with my first presentation at 100% Design. Quite honestly, as I said earlier, there was no market. But it was not only what they saw in tangible terms, in terms of the object, but it was the idea of India. So it is, we have always captured global imagination. William Dalrymple's new book, The Golden Road, talks about it in great detail. It's a brilliant read. But I have experienced this at every occasion, probably finding myself as a lone voice in that contemporary space, but feeling the power of what Indian imagination had to offer. Like, people would come and forth and talk about things, stories of, family members having lived in India, the idea of luxury, blah, blah, blah. Not much was recorded. Lots more has been written in the last decade. So it was a true discovery. With regards to the blurring of boundaries, I think another very important aspect that I'd like to talk about is it's literally 100 years to the Industrial Revolution in Europe, which started in the early 20th century, 1920, so on, whatever. And I think that period saw a very strong shift towards, industrially produced sleek objects that were mass-produced, new materials, et cetera, et cetera. And that captured the imagination of what the modern home would look like. Then we move into the 21st century, and of course we saw that that was not enough, and we had to sort of blur boundaries, and collectible design emerged, art and design emerged. I think the current moment is a very special one, because here we are seeing the coming together and the blurring of craft, design, art, the presence of craft across all visual arts. Venice Biennale recently was an amazing example. And I think it takes me back to, 18th century globalization, where the idea of the hybrid came together. Craftsmanship interpreted in a Western form, or Indian, so on and so forth. And I think we're back to that rediscovery of how things can be made differently across the world.
I just wanted to comment on that picture. I don't know if some of you were lucky enough to go in Venice this summer, but this is something we selected with Gunjan because we thought it was quite a powerful example. It's a picture of the installation that won the Gold Lion this year at the Contemporary Art Biennale of Venice. And this installation is made by a collective of women who are from a region and specialize in that weaving crafts, okay, of weaving structure. And it is very interesting to see that craft is coming also in a space where it was not expected before and is getting that recognition and that interest. When we were discussing, and it's true that in Europe you have this whole art history with a hierarchy of the genre, okay? And the decorative arts were always very at the bottom in terms of what you are valuing, like portraits, fine arts, all of this was considered higher. And I think that now it makes no sense, and people are looking for this exclusivity of the end-making process, and also something that is maybe true, speaking from a community, grounded in a sense, which is the example of that installation. And I've also put another image. So this is a detail, of course, of the installation. And this is, for example, an exhibition which I participated in Paris a long time ago, which was the first massive exhibition on ceramic at the Museum of Modern Art of Paris. And you know, there's also this trend maybe that you've observed either in the design or in the visual art field about ceramic. And people are just getting to this kind of materials. They are getting back to textile, they are going back to ceramic. And when you're between the two worlds, it's something that is really interesting to observe, actually. And then maybe, yeah, this one, it's an example of a young girl painting some vases at Sèvres. So Sèvres is one of our most important manufacturers in France of ceramic and porcelain. And these vases were made for the Olympic Games athletes that happened in Paris this summer, and they wanted to give them some craft vases from Sèvres. And I like the idea that you can find also the craft in some completely unexpected environment in spaces, which is sports in that case. And that it's part also of the pride of a country and the history of a country. Either I'm talking about France or either you're talking about India. And so that's why we think it's still very relevant and contemporary in that sense. And so these are examples of your work exhibited internationally, because Gunjan is being very modest, but she was again exhibited also in Venice this summer. So it's always nice to see also the Indian scene growing on that kind of international platform, because it means getting a different kind of recognition. And so yeah, these are previous exhibitions of yours abroad, if I'm correct. And maybe we'll get to our last subject of today, which is actually one of the main things. It's what are the challenges ahead? If you talk about contemporary craftsmanship, of course, you know that it's raising a lot of issues, like how to preserve the craft, how to get it to another level, which is international exhibition, recognition, blah, 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 what we just said. So I think one of the first questions, and you have a very good example about this, is how to exhibit the craft today. What is the good platforms? What are also maybe the guidelines in terms of presenting the work, who has been part of it? So we just put that example of Révélation, and maybe you want to tell a bit more about what it is.
So Révélation is a contemporary craft biennale that's held at the Grand Palais, obviously a spectacular location in Paris. And I repeat, it's contemporary craftsmanship, because that's really where one has to put their scouting hat on and look for contemporary craft from all over the world. It's not as obvious as it is in Korea and Japan. You can see it there, but you have to dig it through in many other parts of the world. So I would say it's a brilliant platform, and it's kudos to the last decade where platforms such as these have emerged. Of course, the French have been at the forefront of such movements and initiatives. It's been their way of approaching and understanding heritage craft and the importance of how do you bring it into the future. So that dialogue is this platform. I had the privilege of curating India's presence at the banquet. amidst a bunch of other countries. And it was time was short. We always end up getting invited sometimes at the last minute. Budgets were a constraint. So what it prompted me to do, which I maybe wouldn't have done, was to peek into the ateliers of the craftsmen that I knew and see what they had as opposed to commission them for new works or new ideas. And I have to say, I was absolutely dumbfounded with how I saw them playing with ideas that were so contemporary. Ideas that were self-generated, which meant that the agency of a craftsman as a creative thinker can be a very powerful tool, and that could be the future for Indian master craftsmen to be recognized the way they are in Japan or Korea. So here we presented, that's a kangan. It's a wrist ornament, which is a large object presented in Paris, made in terracotta by a master craftsman. His name is Prithviraj Singh Teo, is a legacy craftsman. A very theatrical object, I mean, obviously not seen by anyone in the West. So it really was something that people reacted to in a way like, is this even made in India? Are things like that happening? Because it's Musée Guimet that's been kind of laying the narrative of what Indian craft looks like. Many such examples. Another platform that I think deserves a mention is Homo Faber. It's an initiative by the Richemont Group that owns Cartier and that owns the Michelangelo Foundation. Homo Faber is in its 3rd edition, currently on display in Venice, which presents the best of contemporary craftsmanship on a global platform. So to answer Amandine's question about what is the right platform, what is the way of exhibiting it, what are the, how do you elevate something that's so everyday and, something that we kind of tend to ignore. So I would say these platforms have been significant in what they have done for this space.
And another aspect when we talk about how to also exhibit, how to give credit to the craftsmen, these are a question that we ask ourselves every day. I'm currently preparing a show in Paris about textile, Indo-French textile, mostly with contemporary art pieces inspired with or made with textile as a medium, but also some heritage pieces, because the story between France and India in that field has been going on for some time. And we will be showing this in Paris at Mobilier National. Mobilier National is in French the national manufacturer for heritage, for furniture. It has been created by the king back in the 17th century, and since then they have kept collections of furniture in every kind of style, also tapestries, and they are now merging with Sèvres also as a ceramic manufacturer. So they are, I would say, the biggest public institution in my country to represent our craftsmen and also to keep on producing contemporary pieces, because they commission designers every year who they are inviting to co-produce with their master craftsmen. So that's also very interesting, but sometimes part of the discussion we had was, we know that people can be also scared of sharing their know-hows, of collaborating with foreign designers, of opening their doors. So we know that you have all of these subjects that need to be flagged in a sense, Absolutely. And you need to be aware of that. We traveled together some months ago in Jaipur, and I was touring some people from France. Gunjan was very nice, and she opened some doors for us of people who she's been working with for a long time, and I was very cautious on how to introduce the people we were traveling with, because there is always the thing of, are you gonna copy, or are you gonna take the know-how? What are you gonna make out of it? If you just produce something, what is the context in which you're gonna show it? And I think all of these aspects need to be addressed today, especially in the problematic of contemporary craftsmanship. And maybe if I go on one of the last aspects of the challenges, it's the training and the education about the crafts, because I come from a country where you have an education system for everything, which is well identified. Like if you want to learn design, you go to a design school. If you're gonna go and do some embroidery, you will go in some school that is specialized for that. And I arrived in India, I discovered the craft, which is amazing, and I'm like, where are you guys learning it? And they said, it's through the family process. So it's not like something that is clearly identified, and if one day the next generation is not wanting to continue or to pass on that legacy, is gonna die. And in Europe, we have been facing that problem, I think, maybe already 10 or 15 years ago. All the luxury industry was like, are we gonna train the new people who are gonna keep the know-hows and work for us in the future? So you had some initiatives starting in France about creating schools which are dedicated to these very high practices also of the craft. So here is an example of Versailles. So Versailles is a very big heritage places in France where I used to work before coming to India. And before I came to India, they opened that campus, which is dedicated to métiers d'art, so fine crafts actually, and craftsmanship, so textile, but also woodwork. And they are trying to make the kids understand in France that this is attractive. And how do you create that new attractiveness in the field of craft for people who are going to make the craft tomorrow? So I don't know if it's something that you've questioned yourself about also, or...
Absolutely. It's, I have to say, working in craft is a very humbling process, because what the craftsmen bring to the table, I feel, is definitely a lot more than as a trained designer I could. It's centuries of know-how. It's a way of living. It's it's an entire community that supports that particular craft form. I, over the past 2 decades, showed my work abroad, tend to get famous, got written about, and had amazing opportunities that came my way, thanks to the crafts and the cultural narrative that I was putting forward. And there came the question that if, design is sorry, it may sound a little, it's not the politically correct way of putting it, but it's perhaps the best way to understand it, is design is a first world phenomena. It's something we all understand, we all we're traveling all over the world, we're doing all kinds of amazing things, and you get a lot of recognition. Craft, on the other hand, until recently has remained in a very third world context, It remains in the community context. It's not a story that's really been talked about. It's only the end object that gets showcased. And I question this a lot. Part of what I did at Ikkis, has two, the design brand, you can check it online. It has 2 elements. There is Ikkis Unlimited, which is a combination of craft and industry. Unlimited production, it's not mass, it's luxury mass. Ikkis Limited, on the other hand, is a collaboration between myself as creative director of the brand and a master craftsman. What we did, and these are just tiny steps each one of us can take, is that we decided to make sure that it was a double signature. We have the profile of the craftsman with the legacy, with an explanation of who they are, what they do on our website. There are only 21 editions made, which means we commit to the craftsman for 21 editions, financially and on account of all the marketing strategies that we put into place. There is a limited edition certificate signed by the co-sign between myself and the craftsman. So it's basically small ways of bringing forward this idea that they are equal. It is a collaboration. It's not Gunjan Gupta has assigned a design to XYZ and they've just made it. So I think it's this sort of crediting which is now becoming definitely an important curatorial exercise all over the world. Homo Faber has something called doppio firma, which in English means an Italian word which means double signature. Again, the idea of a designer, because designers do bring something to the table for crafts. We're able to bring in maybe a perspective, we're able to link consumers and customers to craftsmen, but it has to be an equal credit format. So, yeah.
So I think we raised the main topics that we wanted to share with you today about why we love craftsmanship and why we think it's worth investing in that field and promoting that field very actively.
Thank you. Can we please have a big round of applause?